Hello, my name is Eric, and I'm here with my colleague Martin. How you doing,
Hello,
Martin?
hello. I'm very, very, very well. It's very warm here in Munich. It and it's only getting hotter from what we've heard actually in the next few days. The AC is on slash our fan is on, and yeah, so we're melting away here in the lovely south of Germany. How is London doing?
Tell me about it. I am melting myself, hot as anything over here in London, but that is summer. Actually, no, it's not summer. I mean, not typical for London at all. We're in a massive heat wave. But anyway, it's preparing me for California next month. So that's
It's getting warmer and warmer and warmer, and let's try to actually cool us down with with some cars that we're going to talk about today, and I think we're going to talk about a bunch of cars, and we have one very very interesting topic which has to do with car shows. But let's talk and let's start with the very very new, and I think it was just yesterday when this came out, so it's Wednesday today, Tuesday. The new Audi Q3, very very new and looks very very different from the old one that we're very very familiar with.
absolutely, yeah, yeah. I mean, you own one of these previous generations, so I'm sure you're quite familiar with it. I think obviously, for from my perspective, I think it's a very good looking car. It's an evolution of obviously what it was before, in a much more sportier evolution, and falling in line with what Audi's been doing in terms of the top lines, the sportier character that's been initiated under the direction of Mark Lichter. So I think if we look at the previous generation and this new model, it's very much a more aggressive product. I mean, this is more aggressive than the RSQ3, and this
Yeah.
is like a conventional model. So the outgoing RSQ3, you kind of knew why why it was kind of dressed the way it was, but this car is very much in terms of the aggressive character that we've spoken about on previous podcasts.
Yeah, and I think for me personally, I mean, you mentioned that we have a Q3 as the company car, so we're very very familiar with how how the car drives and stuff like that. So I expect the new Q3 actually to be on a very very similar way. But for me, the whole thing is a little bit of a double-edged sword, or two sides of the medal. Exterior, I just don't know about this new one. For me, it's too aggressive. I've known Audis for all my life, pretty much, and they've never really been that kind of super aggressive. They had, obviously, with the old Quattros and stuff like that, there was this very very sportiness about them, this kind of adventurous kind of point of view. But especially when I look into the front nowadays and I see the grill, it's almost like, oh, I want to eat you. And I find that a little bit difficult, to be very very honest, especially when you compare it to the interior, which is just super clean, very very well organized. It's just something where you, even from the pictures perspective, you can feel very very comfortable. And from the exterior, I'm just not so sure. There's two elements that I don't like. One is the grille. I've mentioned this, I think, before, especially compared to the A1, which I really really enjoyed. The more I see it, the more I enjoy it. The new one, the grill not that great, and I just find those wheel arches that look like plastic a little bit strange. I didn't like them on the Porsche concept that we saw in Geneva. I don't like them on that kind of particular car, on that kind of particular Audi. It looks just a little bit, let's say, cheaper than it probably is. But the interior makes up for a lot of that. To be very very honest, the interior is, in my opinion, very very well done.
I agree with you. From the aesthetic perspective of the exterior, it's quite aggressive. The interior is, not necessarily a calming environment, but everything appears to be very well laid out, and I'm sure from an Audi perspective, it's going to have very quality materials. Now, looking at it, from a perceived quality perspective, this car does appear very, very well, very refined, very well, organized in terms of achieving that sporty character that its exterior design alludes to. I agree with you in terms of detail elements from the exterior perspective. The piano black appliques around wheel arches is not anything that I've ever been fond of. I mean, these are areas that are very prone to uh, get damaged. They're near the wheels. They could get pitted, scratched, and in no time it's going to look very, very bad indeed. So. But I agree with you in terms of interior. It's good, and I think it's also a very good evolution for the product. And I think a lot of people are going towards, wanting to have a sportier car that they can identify with. And so we'll see if it is successful. But in terms of typology, in terms of segment as well, this is a very important product for Audi. And I think they've done a good job. I wish they'd tone down the aggression a bit, but overall, I think it's good for what it is.
Yeah, a little bit of less is more, to be very, very honest. But especially from the exterior, but everything from the rest, I do 100% agree. Especially interior, I do like the interior a lot on the new Q3. But yeah, and it's gonna be a very, very sought after car. I mean, we see a lot of them down here in Germany. I've seen a lot, in the UK of them as well. But when we talk about cars that we see a lot, probably one of the cars that we don't see a lot or won't see a lot over here in Europe is going to be the new Mercedes A-Class sedan, because that is very, very much made for the Chinese market. And we have criticized the A-Class before, especially the new one. But I think we can say, from an exterior perspective, the sedan is actually quite nice.
Yes, I do agree. I think it looks nice. It's an A class with a trunk. Everything ahead of the B pillar is A class as we've seen it before. I think as a product, in order, and as you mentioned accurately, it's definitely been conceived for markets like the Chinese market, which is big on sedans. Also, the U.S. market. I mean, this car, the longer wheelbase version of this car was actually unveiled in Beijing earlier this year, and so it's clear as to which market Mercedes-Benz is targeting with this product. Now, I think it still has the problem that I have with the A-Class is its front overhang, and obviously that's still present here in this car. But in terms of getting someone into the Mercedes brand, this is the entry-level Mercedes, and it does look quite good. The interior, on the other hand, is a victim of price point, I would say, because there's a lot of things that are have come over from the S class in terms of some identifiable brand elements, if you will, and it just doesn't work as well in a much smaller package. I think they need to scale down some of those elements, and in particular, the door panel just doesn't sit well with me. It looks like a much cheaper product, but again, it is, right. We're not spending six figures on an A class. It's not an S class, but yeah, I think it's a decent product, and it probably will be very successful for the market in which it was created.
Yeah, 100% agree. And I think, I mean, as kind of as nice, and I don't want to say great, like I think nice is, and I mean this in a very, very positive, nice way in the English language, not in this kind of, oh yeah, this could be much better. No, it is actually a very, very nice exterior. But I do agree on the interior. The interior, I mean, I have a problem with Mercedes interiors for a long time already. I didn't like this little, touchscreen thingy, tablet thingy that they've done in the generation before this one. Now, I'm not majorly a big fan of the MBUX and this kind of two split screen system, and I'm definitely not a fan of the vents nowadays. I think Mercedes grow up, do something new with the vents. I mean, it's just do something with them, make it modern. They just look so old school in that kind of regards. And if you then see these screens and then the combination with the vents, and then it doesn't matter if it's in an A class or an AMG or in an S class or in a C class, it's just like you have to make sure that the feeling is modern. And I don't necessarily have that. And especially if we compare that with the Audi, where it is a little bit less is more, where it is quite reduced, but you still have everything that you need. I'm not quite sure if Mercedes is completely up to that, and as good as work as they do on the exterior, I think they still have a lot to do on the interior. And I don't just want to blame it on the package, because I think they do have certain kind of opportunities to change some kind of things. I don't want to, I don't know what kind of influence marketing has in terms of then, kind of matching the ranges and stuff like that, and the different kind of car series and all these things. But generally speaking, it looks like a missed opportunity here from the exterior, from the interior. Sorry, the exterior, I think that's not bad. That will sell very, very well, I think, especially in the US as well, especially if we compare it with like a Volkswagen Jetta or something like that. That's kind of a great kind of comparison, and they're going to have a very, very successful market with that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And, the brand image is definitely gearing more towards the younger demographic as well. And as you mentioned, in terms of its competitors, it's a way of getting into the brand, and that brand carries a lot of weight. So, I mean, good job on the design, I think, of the exterior in particular. And it's a good looking car, but I do agree with you in terms of interior. So the next car that I'd like to actually discuss is the Porsche Macan, which is also an evolution. Now this is a refresh. Because the German companies typically have a 7-year product cycle. So this is a car that was unveiled in 2014. Where now it's 2018. It's not entirely new, but it does kind of move into what Porsche is doing with their other products, in particular from the rear, and the full length and very thin tail lamp treatment. I think that was very, very well done for this new generation. From Macan.
Agree. And I think the biggest takeaway from this car in terms of really the design is where Porsche is going. Yeah, I mean, we've seen teaser pictures of the new Taycan, which is pretty much the Mission E, going into production. The headlights obviously have been very, very close to what the Mission E has been, so they're bringing that into this kind of new Macan. The taillights exactly the same thing. The very, very thin line, a very, very reduced kind of lighting system around the car, which I personally very, very like. I do enjoy that. It kind of started off with the big Bugatti tail light. That was just one big light that was really, really cool. In my opinion, I just personally have a problem with Porsche and SUVs. To be very, very honest, it's just something for me I don't personally like. So I don't really want to judge the Porsche and the SUV. It's just not my cup of tea, to be very, very honest. I'm more excited about kind of seeing those kind of cues a little bit ahead of then what's going to happen with the Taycan. Is that really going to be hopefully a sports car, or is that just going to be an electric Panamera? This is what is really going to be interesting for us, I think, to see in that sense on this new Macan. To be very, very honest, I saw it. Tiny little facelift. A few things that changed. Not really my car that I'm very, very interested in. If we're talking about Porsche, we're talking about some other Porsches, but it is what it is. And I think it will still sell a lot of cars with what it is, of course, from a Macan perspective, because it is one of their most popular cars. It's, if people want to have the Porsche nowadays, it's either the Cayenne or it's the Macan. It's not the 911 anymore. And that's what it is. And I think they're going to do very, very well with it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't doubt that. But obviously, this is another car that was launched in the Chinese market. Because they sell a third of all of the Macans produced over there in China. So that is, and again, it's a very subtle refreshes to certain elements, in the bumpers and the tail lamp and things that we've covered. But it's, I'm generally not a fan of SUVs, but, it's very hard to get away from them now. And I think, in terms of, a typology that showcases an individual's kind of identity, or, someone that wants more practicality, obviously they've taken off. So, it's interesting. But what is particularly interesting, again, is the fact that this was launched not at any motor show. Obviously, it was launched in Shanghai, which showcases the importance of that car in that market. But it's interesting that a lot of debuts now, even major debuts like Polestar, for example, were made away from traditional motor shows. And I think that is kind of our main topic for this week, discussing what is going on at some of these motor shows and the products that they're attracting at these motor shows. For example, the Singer that was unveiled at Goodwood. And, that's a car, like you mentioned to me earlier, set the internet on fire when it was unveiled. Uh,
Yeah.
and that company based in California has had a lot of publicity and has shown numerous times over at the Quail in Pebble Beach. Now, with their latest product, they're bringing it over to Goodwood. What are your thoughts on that car?
Okay, so as you mentioned correctly, of course, the Singer Porsche kind of broke the internet. Yeah, it is this particular car is the Kim Kardashian of cars that has come out. Look, it has a big bum. Yeah, let's be very, very honest. And it's just, for me, I do very, very much appreciate Singer Porsches. The original ones, like the very, very first one that came out, and that was kind of the starting point for the company. I really, really enjoyed that one. If I see this one now, this has nothing to do with what I think a cool 964 should be like. It is too much. It is too wide. Like the wheel arches in particular, they look like they've been glued on. I do understand it's about weight reduction. I do understand it's about performance and all these things, and I can understand also why people absolutely love this kind of thing. But for me, to be very, very honest, this has it just, and this is, I think, the biggest disappointment for me personally. It is just not a nice looking car anymore, because it doesn't really look like it's a perfect, this is like what we used to from Singer. It's like absolutely perfect. Like the shapes are absolutely perfect. Like the surfaces are absolutely perfect. And then now you have these wheel arches, of course, to save, weight and stuff like that. And I've asked someone who worked on that kind of car and said, yeah, it was the intention of the designer. And okay, it's full performance, but it takes a little bit away of this kind of glamorous picture that we had of Singer before, with these absolutely beautiful Porsches. And now it's just, I'm not so sure. It's just like, it's not my preferred Singer, to be very, very honest. I'd rather prefer the little bit older ones, like the more traditional ones, where they really only changed very, very little, but, subtly just made it extremely, extremely nice. This one for me, just too much. And like I said, and I know a lot of people are going to hate me for that, but it is really the Kim Kardashian of car design at the moment. A lot of people look at it, and on the other hand, of course, it does have a big bum.
I mean, this. I hear what you're saying. This is a very much a different, a different example of what Singer is able to do. Because in the past, as you've mentioned, they've taken a 1964. Or sorry, a 964, so a 1990 era Porsche 911, and transformed it into something that was always kind of the goal, was to optimize it, to make it sit right, optimize it in every area. So be it making the panels out of carbon fiber, making certain improvements to the engine, making it sit on 17-inch wheels, for example. It was always a case of really just like optimizing the vehicle to the max, but also not making it like showy.
Yeah, exactly.
More of an understated, but really, really specifically optimized Porsche through various different elements, like the nickel treatment on these cars, for example, is amazing. It's something that is not traditional in the car space. It wasn't chrome. It wasn't loud. It was certain elements, the jewelry type bits that really made it stand out and commanded a presence. And the fact that all these customers could specify it however they wish to their individual taste was ideal. Now, this is a performance beast. But at the same time, they try to integrate certain elements of design. So, for example, the seat headrest,
Mm-hmm.
the form of that seat headrest is quite pleasing. It's quite nice. I really like the door panels as well, in terms of, taking out material. I mean, there's so many elements on that car that are about optimizing it in terms of reducing weight. And basically that's what it's called. I mean, it's the dynamics and lightweight study, the DLS.
Yeah.
So, in collaboration with Williams, this is I'm sure a performance beast. Like, I don't know figures. I haven't been behind the wheel. I haven't even sat in one, but I did see it sitting up there on the Goodwood stand. And there was a couple of cars that were actually running as well in the up and down the hill climb. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
this is Singer's space. That's the target demographic that they're looking to hit. But at the same time, it's Porsche's 70th anniversary, and they were showcasing a very different interpretation of the recent 911, which is the that speedster concept study, which is going to make it to production as well.
Yeah, and I think this is the big, just to kind of, not putting this into the wrong way. I do like singers. That's really not the problem for me. It's just like this singer was a little bit too much, and this was pretty much the only reason why I didn't like it. And it's one of a few that they've made, of course, but that's okay. But talking about the speedster concept of Porsche, I just asked the question, why? When I think of the speedster in particular, and I think this is the original speedster, like the 356 speedster, the absolute beautiful one, one of the most beautiful Porsches ever made. Very, very simple, super like clean with everything pretty much. I mean, you can ask almost everyone and everybody's like, oh, they're in absolute awe of this kind of car. This new one, to be honest, for a 70th anniversary of Porsche, I was quite disappointed. I would have I would have expected more. If you celebrate an anniversary, then this is just, for me, it's just not cutting it. To be very, very honest, it's just not enough. I don't think it's something completely new. I think it's it looks like someone like a tuner, or like someone who's not as good a singer has worked on something like that, on a kind of a new Porsche.
Yeah.
And this is actually the really, really sad thing, is because they had this this really, really nice picture right behind an original speedster, and then this new one, and you're just like, I would never take in the new one. Like, the old one is still like 100 million times better. And I kind of just would have wished that Porsche would have been a little bit more, would have had a little bit more courage, like, really try to do something new, or really go into way more inspiration with the old speedster, rather than just like, the round side mirrors and stuff like that. But
Yeah. Well, the side mirrors actually take a little bit from the original speedsters, or the original singers as well. The early singers that Rob created had these, but they were nickel plated and they were smaller and rounder, and I think they pay homage to the original better. If but yeah, I mean, I'm not a big fan of the speedster. I mean, like, the thing is, creating something like this, just raking back the windshield essentially, and probably adding a little bit in terms of power, is it's an image thing. They're probably not going to produce a whole lot of them. I wouldn't imagine that they would. It's probably going to be a limited series thing,
Yeah.
just like in the 1990s. And I may have told you this story. When I was a young boy, I was living in New York City, so I was taking the bus back home, and I saw this crowd amassed outside of this dealership. And it wasn't like, a Porsche dealership. It was a dealership that sold all of these crazy, like AMG, whatever, all sorts of like,
Yeah.
sports cars. And inside was Mike Tyson, and he was buying a 911 Speedster.
Yeah.
And so, it's all about, just getting a small quantity of these cars out there, so that people can then continue to talk about the brand. And, the Speedster is something that's going to be, produced in limited form with various enhancements. And I'm not a big fan of it aesthetically, but in terms of like the person that wants to bring the car to Monaco or whatever, and then okay, that's probably who these cars are going to be geared towards, and who they are geared towards, but who they're going to be sold to. So I don't know. I mean, I think that the 911 is the quintessential Porsche model. If you ask anyone about
Yeah.
Porsche, they will tell you about the 911. And so to create something that also attempts to pay homage to another icon, as you mentioned, which was the original 356 Speedster, to celebrate their 70th anniversary, it makes marketing sense, shall we say?
Of course, and it actually, this brings us really to our main point that we can discuss, because you've mentioned this earlier, that the Porsche Macan was shown in Shanghai, obviously making a lot of sense, because most of their kind of Macans are going to be sold in China. The Speedster was, I think, if I remember correctly, was first shown in Zuffenhausen, in their main plant over there, as a kind of a celebratory gift. It's just like, this is what we've done for the 70th birthday. But what we've also seen with Goodwood is that the idea of the traditional car show is becoming more and more obsolete. Maybe not obsolete, but there's definite demise of the traditional kind of car show. We've seen, we've both been to shows such as CES this year, in Vegas, as well as in China. We've been to traditional kind of car shows. We've been to, special kind of events and all these kind of things. But it seems like the time actually for the traditional car shows, where everybody's coming, everybody's meeting up, they show their new cars, both on a concept level as well on a production level, that seems to be over, when we look at it.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, if we just look at what's happening in Paris, I mean, there's a whole mess of automakers that aren't showing up there, and I guess there's different reasons for that. It could be one, just a general lack of new product, and those motor show stands cost a hell of a lot of money. And so I mean, if you look at Paris, like the fact that BMW isn't showing up, Ford isn't going to be there, Mazda, Mitsubishi, Nissan, and that's and that's just half of the list. I mean, I think there's 8 manufacturers that are skipping it that we know of so far. Um,
Yeah.
and even brands like Volkswagen, that is the number one car importer to the French market. It's just insane. But at the same time, like I said, and it's all down to economics. I think at the end of the day, renting space in some of these show stands costs a lot of money, and millions. It's not unheard of. And so when you think about what you could do with that amount of money, that budget, in terms of showcasing your product, like Polestar did when they unveiled that car back in the first, the Polestar 1 was shown in Shanghai at an exclusive event where they invited the people that they wanted to invite. They had them all flown over. They did a awesome, like, massive thing in like an airplane hangar. The thing was so big, and then they got all eyes on that car. They didn't have to compete for, back in the day it was column inches, and no one really, and now it's like website clicks, but they didn't have to compete for visibility with anyone else. So it was a good plan on their part. What's interesting is that Goodwood is basically replacing the traditional motor show, because in the UK there is no motor show anymore. There's like a really small London motor
Exactly.
show that means nothing. But what is happening at Goodwood is kind of the way that things are going. It's these events that are, peripheral, if you will, from the traditional automotive auto show scene. But at the same time, there's every single manufacturer is out there at Goodwood showing in a pop up tent or stands that they've created, like a 2-story, like crazy, showcase of a stand, and they're paying, the Duke of Richmond. I think I I heard, and this might, not be entirely accurate, but that the Jaguar, the JLR stand, was in excess of 20 million pounds. So that's just some ridiculous figures. Um, but at the
Yeah,
same
and
time,
I
you
and to be
hit like so many different people coming to the show to see Formula One cars, to see your bespoke singer unveiled, to see other things that as you're traveling around the Formula One paddock, you also happen to see the new Rolls-Royce Phantom, or on the track. So it's a very interesting way of getting. It's the modern motor show way, I think.
Yeah, and it also I think has to do with the general kind of way nowadays how we perceive brands. When we look back into like Frankfurt as well, and I think Geneva and Tokyo, to a certain kind of degree as well. Those kind of shows are really made for the customers. So you still show stuff and you show your cars that are supposed to be really sold to the people. Now you can buy them actually at the shows. You can sign up for them. You see that in Geneva all the time.
Well, you,
All these kind of supercar manufacturers, like, oh, you can sign up for the cars pretty much right away. I mean, I know that Roof, the company, that kind of tunes or builds their own Porsches as well, similar to a Singer again. They've had the Yellowbird version 2 or whatever they called it, like the new Yellowbird, and they pretty much sold the whole lot of it in Geneva. And I think this is really what the kind of perception nowadays of the car shows is probably going to be. It's this kind of advanced, we can see as many cars as possible. Maybe we can buy one here. So the kind of concept car is just a sign of, oh, look how cool we are, so we can pull the people over there. Whereas with something such as Goodwood in particular, you can say this is really for the enthusiasts. So for them, it's not always just about buying a car. It's about enjoying the experience. It's about, building an emotion, building a relationship with a certain kind of brand, or, building on an existing relationship with the brand that a certain person has. And I think those kind of events are much more powerful for that. And of course, those kind of private events they just give you way more exclusivity. If you can say, oh, I've been invited to that kind of event, that's a different kind of story of, oh man, I want to buy that car. I'm really, really interested in that. Like, you're focusing on just one brand. But on the other hand, of course, the really, really downside is we just see fewer concept cars. Yeah, because, they're just not going to do a show for a concept car. I mean, that would probably be way too expensive.
yes, no, but like you said, I mean, there's so many different people coming to these events. There's people from all walks of life, people that want to see people on the rally stage, people that want to see other cars racing on the track. But then they have to. It's kind of like when you go to Vegas, right? You're in Vegas and you want to go from your hotel room to the conference center or to the pool or to the breakfast. You've got to walk through the casino. There's no other way to get to the pool than to walk through the casino. And maybe while you're there, you'll drop a fiver on the slots or whatever. And that's basically the way of Goodwood. And because you're tapping into other people that, when I was walking around, Neo had a stand over there and, they showed 59. And there was a girl that talked to, her boyfriend. She like was walking by and she was like, what is Neo? And so it's that way of increasing not only your visibility in the eyes of people that have no idea who you are and could be your potential customers, but it's also, you're very right, the aspect of being in that space where it's the environment, it's the allure, it's the exclusive factor. When you go to the McLaren stand, for example, is like this big thing over in the corner right next to the Goodwood house, and then they've got this lavish backyard spread where they've got all of their clients or prospective clients out there drinking champagne. It's like it's a cool day out for these guys. So, and it's a great way to showcase the brand in a setting that is basically what you're looking to target for McLaren anyway. I mean, the buyers of McLarens, let's face it, they're all one percenters, right? So they're the ones they're the ones going to the Goodwood Ball
Exactly.
with the Duke of Richmond. So yeah, I mean it's interesting to see how people are moving away from the traditional motor show. When I was a kid, you used to be able to go up to any motor show and stand and buy a car on the spot, and you can't do that everywhere anymore. I know you still can in Geneva.
Yeah,
I know probably certain other shows where you can do that, but you can't do it everywhere. And Detroit was founded on that.
exactly.
It was I mean, the whole thing is put together by the Detroit Dealers Association. So. And I'm really happy actually to hear that they've decided to move it, because Detroit in January is no fun, and especially now that it's competing against CES. That's another show where you're attracting a demographic of individuals that are interested in technology. And you don't get that by going to Detroit. And so automakers are really in tune with that, and they're showcasing really amazing new cars at CES, which is an electronics show. I mean, it's
Yeah.
really changing the game.
So where do you think, because it's obviously easy for us to kind of analyze or criticize a little bit, but where do you think, the car show is going to go? Do you think it's going to disappear? Do you think we're just going to have fewer of them? Or what is your kind of, future, futuristic, or viewing point for the car show, or in, let's say, 10, 15 years? Do you think we will only have a single kind of car show? So the manufacturer will do their own show. Obviously things such as CES will become bigger and bigger, and the technology becomes more included. But what is your personal opinion on this?
I think we've seen already a lot of people, a lot of companies rather, flocking to classic car events, and that is kind of an easy one because there's so much nostalgia associated, so much emotion associated with these vehicles that, let's face it, you and I aren't going to go out and buy, singers.
Yeah.
Or, we're not going to go out and maybe, hopefully someday we'll have that DB5 in the garage or whatever. But it's for now, for us in our lifetimes, and in a lot of younger people's lifetimes or lives at the moment. We go there to look at some of these pristine examples of vehicles that were created in a distant past that are extremely appealing from a design perspective, which, now with SUVs, let's just face it, it's not all that exciting anymore.
Yeah.
So I think, to answer your question, in the future, we're going to see a lot more of these, of cars, traditional cars as we know them. I mean, it's going to be difficult to sell autonomous vehicles in a car show, right? But for the immediate future, I think we're going to see a lot more of like salon privé, like there is in the UK in September, I think it is. They launched a new event that took place a few months ago. So you got a springtime, you've got a end of summer, show where there's a bunch of manufacturers that are getting in on that action. Of course, you've got Goodwood. I'm just talking about the UK. But then if you go over to Pebble Beach, you've got, their concept car lawn, which is growing every year. You've got the Quail, which is hyper exclusive, events where you've got all the Singer vehicles over there, as well as others. You've got also, you've got cars that would never display in other shows over there at these specific events that are really tailored. I mean, maybe Geneva, right? Because Geneva is all about like the car constructors,
Yeah.
the fabs or whatever, the I can't even get their names right now, but you know what I'm talking about. These guys that are creating, bespoke examples and customizing things like
Sure.
like Roof,
Yeah.
and, that was a good example. But there's a lot of others like Tech Designs or whatever it's called over in Tech Arts rather
Yeah.
in Germany.
In the
Yes.
Stuttgart area. Yeah.
So
Yeah. No, and I do agree in that kind of sense that we can kind of summarize, I think, a little bit that we say, okay, the car shows will not die. Um, but I think there might be a limit of shows that will survive. So it might just be one, a maximum of two in Europe. I think China might be a little bit different. We see Tokyo already only in a 2-year cycle, and it seems like LA is becoming the main show for the US at this moment in time. So it will just be fewer opportunities, I think, to see those kind of to see the cars, but also the concepts. I think will have a much bigger impact then because you have fewer shows. But let's wrap that bit off here, and we of course would absolutely love to hear from you and in your opinion, where do car shows go in the future? What might happen to them? Maybe there's something that we don't even know yet that might evolve into a car show. But we should move on into one of our favorite bits of the podcast, which is who is where. But we're actually going to start off this with a little bit of a sad part because we had Chris Swenson from Ford has unfortunately passed away, and he was obviously most famous for, I think, just in the past few months, in the past few years, for the Ford GT, the new one. And that was obviously, in terms of design, the biggest news. Of course, Marchione from Fiat Chrysler, the CEO over there, died as well, unfortunately. But Chris Swenson, pretty good career, would you not say?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this Chris, that was really, really sad news for me to hear. I learned over the weekend that Chris passed away. Unfortunately, he'd been battling cancer. We all know what a horrible disease that is. I know it firsthand. My father passed away from cancer as well, and it's a devastating disease. So I really want to send condolences out to his wife, his two daughters, the entire Ford team, that was working under him.
Yeah.
Chris was a Ford man. He was a car enthusiast first and foremost, but he'd spend his entire career at Ford. And you're right. I mean, the most recent thing that he's probably most well known for is that the Ford GT, which he bought, a few months ago. He took delivery of one, and I'm happy that he got to. I'm happy that he got to see that, and own one and drive it, because there's no greater satisfaction for a designer than to see your car on the road, let alone own one, have one in your garage. So good for him for that. I'm happy that he was able to achieve that. But yes, I mean, a hugely influential designer, a British man, that, he graduated from the RCA. He did a bunch of things, including the first car, which was basically it was his college degree show, his thesis project that eventually made it into a production car for Ford. So that was brilliant for him. But then he's also like massively influential in other areas as well. And again, through Ford, he did the first generation Puma. He did the he worked on the Cougar, like a bunch of vehicles. I mean, all through his career, going from Cologne in Germany all the way through, to Australia, all the way through to North America, where he was design director for a North American product for the over there. And
Yeah.
he even did the Fab One from the movie Thunderbirds. I don't know if you've seen that movie. Like it's an amazing, like, just to think, like, that he could have had a hand in. I've got a press kit. I've never actually seen the movie, 2004 movie, but the press kit is what I have, and that thing is just phenomenal. And
Yeah, I mean, he will be missed, I think, for the whole community.
yeah.
And he and like I said, he will be missed, and may he rest in peace. But we have, of course, some positive news as well, which is actually people, moving from one place to another, and this would be Alessandro D'Ambrosio, a Volkswagen man, who, for our surprise, I think we were quite, we were actually quite surprised when we saw this kind of news. He moved over to Mitsubishi as, the executive design director, who apparently will be in charge of the studios both in Japan and and in Germany. And quite a surprise move. Came a little bit out of nowhere. And also, of course, let's say the question is it needed? I mean, of course, Kunimoto, Tsunihiro Kunimoto, the guy who runs Mitsubishi Global Design, he is getting a little bit older now. I think he's 67, so he's definitely on the outlook for a successor. But, with Watanabe-san from Nissan moving over just recently, Thomas Bigwood running the German studio, having another guy coming in was a bit of a surprise. But I think we can be quite interested in seeing what's going to happen with Mitsubishi. I mean, they've shown some cool stuff recently in Tokyo, especially. And you can hope that he's moving it forward, and a Volkswagen man, a long time Volkswagen man, can of course help in that, especially in terms of quality.
Yes. Well, I mean, there's been a lot of things going on over at Mitsubishi. It's definitely exciting times over there at that company, especially since there's the Nissan Renault alliance that bought a stake in Mitsubishi now. That's injecting some much needed cash, and I think in the past, as you mentioned, they've created a lot of cool concepts, and they've always only remained concepts, and that's a real shame, because I thought there were some promising things. If anything, it was definitely pushing the boundaries on the things that they've unveiled even in the last 4 or 5 years. But again, nothing ever kind of made the transition from a conceptual phase into production. Now, I don't know Alessandro D'Ambrosio. Auto and Design broke this story on last week when he came out, when they came out with that article to announce it, and then subsequently, obviously, Mitsubishi has announced, has put out a press release and made their own official announcement. Now, he's going to be the design director of advanced design. So, he's not going to be doing, so essentially he's joining Mitsubishi, which is very much news in itself, but he does have quite a good career, not only at Volkswagen, but also, within the Volkswagen group. So he was head of the concept design studio in Munich for Audi. And that is also something that, is kind of necessary. Because not only is he going to be, as you mentioned, leading, teams at 3 design studios over there or 2 design studios over there in Japan, but also in Germany. So, his kind of experience, I think, in Germany is something that Mitsubishi is kind of looking forward to. And perhaps, they will groom him into taking over for Kunimoto, but I don't really know if that's the plan or the big picture. There's a lot of other people that have been at Mitsubishi that could be potentially have been groomed for that role. Now, it's an interesting announcement nonetheless. I do wish him well in his new role, and I'll be very interested in seeing what it is that he changes, or he manages to push through, and how it is that he ends up working with the team over there.
Exactly, and we wish him nothing but the best. I think it's going to be interesting. From what we know, he's probably going to be based in Japan for most of the time, so that's going to be a very, very interesting development anyways. Because I personally love Japan. It's a fantastic country. Tokyo is really, really nice as well. So a really, really nice adventure. And just very, very quickly to kind of wrap this up, it's not really a move in terms of a big move from company to company, but we have John Sass, who moved, who became actually the head of the Latin American design studio for Nissan. So we stay within the company. And, it was just announced, I think, by Alfonso Baiza, who, just a few months ago already, now they've put out a press release, but he moved internally at Nissan, and he's now heading the studio down in Brazil. So, of course, very, very good for him, but not the kind of biggest move in the sense of he moved from big company to big company, or he left a big company to join a startup, but still very, very well deserved that he got this position. And speaking,
he's been at Nissan for a good while. I mean, besides, he does have experience over there at Mercedes-Benz, and I mean, he's very much an asset for Nissan and as a whole. Talking about all sorts of brands, and for him to be over there in Latin America, he really knows what it is that's happening within the organization, having come from Nissan Design America, where he worked on a number of projects. So it's good for him as well. But yeah, like you mentioned, that's a bit old news now, seeing as he moved down there back in March.
Yeah, exactly. And, just to kind of wrap it up, because, we've done another over 45 minutes. It's, we're getting into our flows over here. But just to kind of make it, of course, from our perspective, also a little bit interesting from a different perspective, we are still looking for people, of course, for our day-to-day business, in terms of the headhunting and recruiting for people. So in particular, interior guys, we have management positions actually at the moment as well. So when you listen to this on a, let's say, 10 plus year experience level, starting from, exterior, interior, color trim, 3D managers, visualization leads, even to modeling managers, studio engineering managers, please do get in touch with us at either myself, Martin, at on Twitter, LinkedIn. What else do we have? Instagram, I think we do have as well. To very, very much to a much delight. Or of course, get in touch with Eric again via LinkedIn, via Twitter, via Facebook. I think as well, Eric, you're represented, as well as on Instagram. And obviously all those kind of connections will be linked here as well. But so if you are looking for something new, please do get in touch with us. We do very, very much appreciate that. Of course, everything will be very, very discreet and highly confidential. So you don't have to worry about that. And
that's how we work. So by all means, if you are looking for something, and again, like Martin said, it's more mid-level or senior level positions. Please do get in touch with us. Let us know what you're looking for, and hopefully we can find something that will suit you.
Exactly. And to kind of finish this whole thing off, as always, first of all, I would like to thank all the listeners that have joined us on iTunes, Spotify, Podigy, but also on YouTube, where we have added the recorded and actually video version of the episode 4 podcast. We will do that more regularly from now onwards, but we will always do that when Eric is present down here in Munich as well, because we have the nice studio here. So it's not going to be every episode, but probably every other episode. But thank you very, very much for following us, for liking us, for giving us a 5-star rating. Continue doing that. And of course, continue giving us the feedback, especially we want to hear about, your opinion about the car shows in particular. Feel free to criticize on, my opinion on the singer as well. I have absolutely no problem with that. And we can also announce that probably not in the next episode, but probably in one of the few ones. We have to wait and see if how quickly we can include that. But we will have guests on the podcast. So that's going to be fairly interesting for us.
The new edition, moving up in the world.
Indeed. And we will try to do that more regularly with the guests and, bring in some other perspectives. But, in the meantime, you have to stick to the two of us. And
sorry.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much for listening again to the 5th episode of the Gestalten podcast. My name is Martin, and on the other line over here is my very, very dear colleague and friend, Eric Galina. And we're looking forward to having you back on board and having you back listening for episode 6 in just about a couple of weeks. Thank you very much, guys. Take care.
Thank you so much, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.